All right. I just want to throw out there that you haven't lived until you've tried to come up with an opening thing to say when you're doing these kind of videos. It's incredibly awkward, especially for somebody like myself. Listen, thanks for joining me and thanks for your time. This is a little bit of a departure from the video series I've been doing lately, where I've been going through some code and showing how to build a chess application in React. And this video, I want to take a minute to spotlight something I've been working on. I want to give a little bit of a demo, partly because I want to be able to show this to some people that I know are currently sort of quarantining themselves. A lot of people are kind of trying to figure out how to deal with that right now. Normally, I would give um, a little bit of an in-person demo, but barring that, I think we can do a little bit of a screen capture demo here in YouTube just to see where things are going, and maybe I can get some ideas off of the folks that see this video. So you know, it's funny. I went ahead and left this up on my screen because while I was working today, I was watching this video, and you'll see how it's related in a second, but this is Professor Robert Schiller at Yale, and every one of his lectures from the 252 finance course is online, and they're incredibly detailed. They're really thoughtful, and they're a gold mine of information for finance. Um, but at this point in the in the lecture, he's talking about sort of a non sequitur. It's kind of funny. He talks about how there's this funny thing where you would think that anything easy to invent would be invented already. And as an example, he highlights the wheeled suitcase, which apparently the current form of wheeled suitcase we have didn't appear until 91. I actually remember as a kid having, the type of suitcase that just had a handle. Um, and then I remember everybody getting the wheeled ones. Um, what's interesting about this story is that he talks about this guy, Bernard Sato, and he actually interviewed this guy. This is a good video. He talks about how, what, why had nobody invented the wheeled suitcase? And when this guy in 1972 was looking at it, he was, kind of discouraged. He would say, I want to make a wheeled suitcase, and people had all kinds of reasons why it wouldn't work. I think in some ways, the more obvious something is, um, the less people pay attention to it because they come up with their own list of kind of negative ideas about it. Well, and so that relates to what we're taking a look at today. Just to preface this, if you had told me a year ago, or even, I don't know how long ago, if you had told me, hey, you're going to be working on this project, I would have been incredulous. The project I'm working on right now is one of those projects that's a little bit like the wheeled suitcase, a little obvious. I think in the case of Bernard Sato, someone told him, well, if it's a heavy suitcase, you just get, one of these things. I don't know if they had carts, but they had these red cap guys or something, or it just wasn't seen as a problem. Um, and that's a little bit where I'm at right now with this feature for Payola. I'm kind of building a larger puzzle when I'm putting together features for Payola because it's kind of an obtuse idea. It's at its core. It's not something I could go out and just. I mean, it wouldn't. It's sort of a catch-22. People would only want to use the core of the Payola system if everybody else was using it. So I've got to offer competitive features, and one of the ways that I've discovered there's a lot of demand for is in point of sale systems, which is to most programmers probably pretty laughable to be thinking in 2020 of breaking into the point of sale system market. But as I've been working on it, I'm realizing that there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of organizations right now that are looking to cut costs. There are a lot of charitable organizations that sell things to the general public that just track cash receipts because they don't have the revenue to justify an expensive system. And obviously, there's other players in the market that are down market like Square or Clover. Cake is a really interesting and notable case, but they're sort of all chasing the same idea. It's a little bit of a race to the bottom. I think Square's being an innovation, and Clover had to do with the fact that with Square in particular, you were getting a whole iPad, and there was some value in that for small organizations because then that iPad is several things to you, you know. So the local cidery up the street or the coffee shop on Spruce Street or whatever it is, they can afford a Square point of sale system. It's a cheaper thing than maybe something more complicated. And even my wife, when she does various things in the gig economy, if she's selling something, she'll use a Square system. And uh, I think the main benefit of it is that you could bring your own iPad to it. So um, you're not having hardware lock-in issues, and you're able to use that iPad for other things too. It's not necessarily just doing this one thing, and in a way, that's its own market opportunity, right? Because there are people that don't want something as complicated as an iPad. Odd enough as it is to say. Um, in my case, I was approached recently by a group that really has a lot of technophobia. They are doing their receipts on paper, and they're concerned that they're losing some of their ability to raise money for a charitable organization due to the fact that their record keeping is really paper based. Some information is slipping through the cracks. They've got to be able to show regulators that they have a certain amount of donations or a certain amount of tax. And if they lump all of their cash together and they don't necessarily know that some of it was collected as sales tax and some of it was collected as a donation, it can be hard to ferret all that out, and it's a lot of work. Especially, it's a lot of work for volunteers or a place that's maybe a side gig. Maybe you're not even able to afford employees. And an iPad is still an expensive thing. Getting a full up Square system, you're looking at somewhere between $800 and $1,500. Some of it you could do just with a smartphone, but there's limitations to that too. So I've been looking at some custom hardware, and the way hardware looks, I've been putting together a little bit of a prototype that I could probably really easily compete with these people in the market already. And and one of the things that I want to do, aside from actually have some innovative features in this space, is the fact that you know there's a little bit of a problem when you're using an iPad. And the problem is if you have somebody who's really technophobic, maybe they're a retired ex whatever, they're a docent or a volunteer, you're not going to be training them to use a really complicated system. And, one of the things that is self limiting or self fulfilling about this industry is that people want complexity. People want features that they need that are potentially complex because they're businesses and they train people, and it's someone's whole job to handle it. But for some people, that's not the case. They're intimidated. They're, for whatever reason, they're trying to get starting, or they're trying to have somebody who's less skilled, or maybe they don't want to spend $800. So one of the problems is if it's just an app on an iPad is, the slightest flick of the finger and someone like this, imagine, I know there's somebody in everybody's life who is particularly um, has a lot of difficulty with these things, but you can slide your finger along the screen, and all of a sudden the app that you're in for the Square system is closed. Um, Somebody was telling me a joke recently about something to do with somebody who's conducting, and they sort of accidentally swiped the screen and they stopped some of the background music. Um, some people are going to have an easier time with that than others, and you don't necessarily want your employees screwing around with an iPad either. I mean, there's some value in that, but I mean, there's also this thing where there's a philosophy behind something doing one thing and doing it well, and the idea of having an iPad cash register is sort of the opposite of that because it's a computer; it can do anything. So rather than use some kind of an app on a phone or a pad, like an Android or a iPad, I'm gonna be rolling my own hardware and locking my application into a full screen and using the a touch screen. And amazingly, touch screens have gotten really cheap. So the innovation of this has to do with the software and also the nicely, cleanly put together, hardware. I'm not going to demo the hardware today, but I'm going to give a demo real quick of the software. Hopefully this will work. And for you techno nerds out there, I've taken my programming stack from other parts of React that I've been using on the web for Android, for iPhone, and I've been using those same components to build an app on what's called Electron. So that's really exciting because that means that my code is sort of everywhere. I don't have to write a special technology or special language or something. It's all sort of the same. Um, and this is just running in a little bit of a demo test development mode, just so that I can run it on a regular computer. But I've already had this running on my hardware, and it works great. Um, okay, so you're gonna have to use your imagination here. The real challenge is sort of showing the fact that this is going to be operating on a touch screen, but I'm going to be operating it with my mouse because, this is running in sort of a development machine. It's sort of like looking at it through in a little fishbowl of and you're sort of seeing the sausage get made here a little bit too. Uh, there's some rough edges here still. There's some things that aren't finished yet, but this is just a preliminary demo to give you an idea of where we're going with this, and show off some of the fun features that I'm thinking about having in this thing. So right off the bat, you're greeted with this screen, and it's important to have sort of the starting screen where you're setting how much money is in the till to begin with. You're setting up maybe pin codes. You're setting up things like employees or discounts for the day. Maybe you're having a buy one get one sale, and you'd put that in here. So this is just a little bit of a placeholder screen. And once we click that, we're going into the main operation of this thing. When I click that, I realize I'm hearing in my headphones this little sort of auditory feedback whenever I click on a button. And that's really important in a touchscreen system, I've discovered. When I let my son, he's about 10 years old, I let him play around with this a little bit. I noticed that if I didn't have any kind of auditory feedback on the touch screen, then he wasn't sure that he clicked on something. But it turns out it helps a lot when you're in a touchscreen situation. So this lock screen where you're having to enter PIN to get into the system, it's you know it's a simple thing, but I think it's really important to have the kind of philosophy where I don't have an enter button, right? So I'm not making people do the extra work that I could do as a programmer. If I can detect that you've entered all four numbers, then I don't need to actually have you hit enter. And whenever there's a success message like that, you don't actually have to click on OK. It's just giving you sort of some feedback. And if you get it wrong, then you're getting this sort of error message that you have to dismiss. So once you're into the system, you can start by doing a new order. And let's jump into it. So this list of items, it's sort of canned. It's just for this demo, but it can come from my database. This is getting a list right now just from a file, and it's so that I can give this demo. But the Payola database actually has a place for pricing information. You know, this is the pricing for the one of my existing customers on the system, and I can pull that pricing down and let it be a little bit customizable. Maybe in the settings screen or somehow in this screen, you could customize where you want certain things, or if you have common items that you don't want to be scanning. A lot of times people don't have a whole UPC database of goods, but that's the kind of thing I could integrate with in the future. So this display up here is really meant to show the cashier what we're going to be showing to the customer. I have a little LCD screen on the other side of this thing where whenever you enter a certain item and there's a price or you're showing the total and that kind of thing, we can show that to the customer because that's a pretty common thing for cash machines like this. So let's go ahead and put a couple things in our cart here. We can order a couple. We can get a couple of pairs of shoes here. We can click this little red trash can button and get out of this if we want. So we can clear everything out. We don't actually want to buy those. But if we do want to buy it, then we can click this little green cash button here, and we're into our payment options. You notice we calculated tax automatically, and there's a few ways of paying that. These are just placeholders, check and Payola. Those are things that I'm going to have to add, but just to get this thing sort of off the ground, cash is the option that was the easiest to write a program for to start with. And it's also sort of the least common denominator in this kind of thing. So when you click it, I took a little bit of styling from antique cash registers. They have that circle, and you can just pick an amount of cash that somebody has handed you. Let's say they handed you $25, and you're done. At this point, a receipt would print if we had one of those little receipt printers hooked up. Those are actually getting a little cheaper these days. These little register thermal tape printers, I think it'd be pretty easy to integrate with one of those. But you can see it just shows you your change due and it records the transaction. And now if we go into the summary for the register, we can actually see that sale is now reflected. So we started with 150 in the cash drawer, and now we should have 2106 in there in addition to it. And we've also kept track of how much tax we've collected, and we've separated out tip, donation, and any discounts. So let's do one more order. We're going to add a couple of pairs of shoes, maybe a shirt, maybe some pants, get a whole outfit. We're going to go back into our payment options. And one of the features that I wanted to show off in this video is the fact that in a cash sale, we've sort of got this this little matzo ball of change hanging off to the side here, and it's pretty inefficient. I mean, it's kind of a waste of time to be messing around with change and handing people change, and you're making it, you're distracted, you're having to open up those coins and get enough coins. It's sort of a hassle. I want to try and reduce that if possible. So I made this sort of automatic thing to discount the change of the tax automatically. I think it's a really common use case, and I think the types of businesses that I'm hoping to help out with this are the types of businesses where you'd want your cashier to just be able to hit that button, and now we've discounted you the change. I think customers would really like it. If you don't want to do it, then just ignore the button. If you come into the screen and you don't know what that button is, you're not going to hit it anyway. But if you sort of understand that, oh, that'll discount and I don't have to fumble with change, then you can hit it. It's really easy. And now you can say 32 and you can get a 20, a 10, and a 1 from your customer and hit that, and now no change is due. I think that's going to be a solid source of efficiency at some smaller operations. You've got a line of customers going out the door. You don't need to be fumbling with change for all of them. You know, it's obnoxious to be handing people change. You're handing them bills and you're trying to hand them a receipt and change, and people juggle it and drop it. It's dumb. So now we've reflected the fact that we've got a little bit of a discount in there. We've got $2.70 in taxes. We know how much we have in sales, and we know how much should be in our cash drawer. um, so yeah, that's going to let us keep track. Now, I think it's really important to have these two buttons, donation and cash tip, right here on the screen, because I've noticed there's a lot of these businesses, especially these cash-only businesses, that can't really afford fancy systems, or they've just got a cheap $100, $200 cash register. They got to figure out what to do with this jar that they have out, and the jar is either typically for donations or tips. And so being able to take a wad of cash out of those jars and have it accounted for and put into your locked cash drawer or cash box, and now to know that that money is from one of those sources and is not necessarily part of the sales tax amount, or maybe it's for the cash tip. Maybe it's meant to be given to the workers at the end of the day. And, there's going to be some places that, as it is now, it's a little too easy to maybe do a little bit of tip theft from your employees, because you're having somebody go in and clean out that jar at a certain amount of time, and you're not necessarily keeping track of how much is in it, or how much to give out to your employees. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you're going to hit closeout. And throughout the day, the idea is that all of these transactions are getting saved in the Payola database, so that somebody who is an authorized user can go in and review that information at any time. And then they'd have a lot of really, really detailed records that they could look through in order to see sales trends, in order to figure out how much to write the check for the sales tax. Or they would have really good records to be able to say how much they had received in donations for, helping to improve their status as a nonprofit. So I hope you enjoyed this demo, and I really want to thank you for your time. And I hope that if you've been following along with the React series, maybe you caught this video too, and maybe you'll shoot me a line if you have ideas, if you're interested in working together. So thank you very much.